What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name's CJ, and in today's video, we're back at it looking at some more NBA player props over on PrizePicks. We've got just one NBA game to talk about, unfortunately, but it's a good one. The Denver Nuggets are taking on the Phoenix Suns tonight, so we'll definitely dive into some points props, and I've got a couple of three-point props that I want to take a look at. Now, yesterday's video, we did decent. I would say decent. If you took the Joel Embiid over on rebounds, well, then you probably cashed. And the two Utah Jazz players, despite being bumped up after the Mike Conley Jr. news, of course, Mike Conley Jr. was ruled out of yesterday's game for the Utah Jazz. Then you saw Donovan Mitchell's assists get bumped up and Royce O'Neal's points get bumped up, but both guys still hit. Donovan Mitchell went under his assist prop, and Royce O'Neal still cleared the 7.5 point prop. So a decent day overall in yesterday's video. We're going to look to improve, get back to that 4 out of 5. Maybe we'll even hit a 5 out of 5 in today's video. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you're not subscribed yet, make sure that you are now with notifications turned on, especially if you play over on PrizePicks, because the picks that I mentioned in today's video, once I upload the video, they have a shelf life of about an hour or so, where the lines makers, lines movers over at PrizePicks aren't going to change things on us. So it'll give us some time to get these picks locked into our various entries over on PrizePicks. And if you don't play on PrizePicks, well, now's a great time to try it out. 100% instant deposit match being offered right now by using promo code Curry. So if you deposit anywhere from $20 up to $100, they're going to instantly match that entry, and then they're going to give you double your money. So if you put in 100, they'll give you 100. You'll have $200 to play with. It's a fantastic deal. I'll leave a link down in the description below that'll get you that promo. Again, promo code Curry is all you need to put in. If you're not a part of our Patreon group yet, now is a great time to do that. Beginning of the month is always a great time to join the Patreon group. So if you like what I do here on YouTube, I do even more of this over and on Patreon. So this is a great time to join if you haven't yet. I put together some spreadsheets for NBA. I'm even dabbling in some NHL as the NBA season starts to wind down. So we'll be getting into baseball after NBA goes away completely. So it's a fun group. We're in Discord every single day talking about our favorite plays, favorite picks over on PrizePicks and the various other sites. So definitely think about joining. It helps me out as a creator. I appreciate you so much for those of you who are patrons. So let's get into it, guys. We got that one game to talk about. We've got the Denver Nuggets at the Phoenix Suns. This game has a 223.5 implied point total, with Phoenix as 5.5 point favorites at home. So pretty decent total here. The spread's not too worrisome. Hopefully, once again, we always got to hope that is not a blowout. There's been a lot of blowouts even since the playoffs have started, and blowouts are definitely a killer, a backbreaker when we're talking daily fantasy sports, when we're talking sports betting. So hopefully this game does stay close and competitive, and we have a pretty high scoring output. So with that being said, now that we kind of have an idea, a feel for the game totals and the spread, let's get into some of these picks. The first guy I want to talk about is currently questionable, dealing with a back injury. That's Michael Porter Jr., who's at 19.5 points, obviously taking on the Phoenix Suns. Game tips off at 9:50 p.m. Eastern Standard Time over on PrizePicks. But we know Michael Porter Jr. has a history of back issues. Now, this is the playoffs. This is, the biggest stage of them all. So I hope that for the Denver Nuggets' sake and for the fans and daily fantasy sports players and sports bettors like myself, that Michael Porter Jr. does find enough energy, enough health to suit up and lace up the sneakers and play tonight against this Suns team. Anyway, at 19.5 points, it seems like it's a little bit too high for Michael Porter Jr. I had him the other night going under, and he did end up staying under. I'm looking to take the under again on MPJ. So let's head over here to Number Fire. You can see that he is a GTD, a game time decision. He's projected for 19 points today. Now, 19 points obviously would lean toward the under here on Michael Porter Jr., which is exactly where I kind of was feeling is the way we should go as well. So let's type his name into NBA.com. We'll open up his player card here. We'll look at his season averages, playoff averages, and then we'll get into some of the other stats here for MPJ here. 19 points per game this season puts him under 19.5, so still looking like a strong play here for the under. We're going to look at his playoff games so far. He's appeared in 7 games during this playoff run. Over 34 minutes played per game. He's averaging 18.3 points per game, which again indicates that the under is definitely still on the table here for Michael Porter Jr. So let's click traditional splits. Let's remove the playoff filter. Let's look at how well he's done against this Phoenix Suns team in the regular season. So for that, we click advanced filters. We go to all teams and we change this to just the Phoenix Suns and we click run it. And we'll get those results here in just a moment. So he played Phoenix in 2 games this season, 27.3 minutes per game, averaging just 10.5 points. Now, obviously, that's not a very high average, but it's also not a very high minutes played for Michael Porter Jr. His minutes are obviously up since these 2 regular season matchups. So we'll kind of take this sample size with a grain of salt here and move on and look at some of his recent game logs throughout this playoff run. So we'll type in Porter Jr. and then we got Michael Porter Jr. If you go to game logs and go to the 2021 season, obviously scroll all the way down to the bottom, then you can take a look at his 7 different playoff appearances this season, get an idea how well he's been scoring. So overall, he's only covered 19.5 points just 1, 2, 3 times out of his last 7 games. So his cover rate is not very good here. Now, to give you even further context and to provide even more information about different scenarios for Michael Porter Jr., I'm going to refer to FanSure, which is one of my favorite ways to go to get these insights. Now, over on FanSure, versus the Phoenix Suns, he is 0 for 5, 0 for his last 5 games and covering this 19.5 point number. So that's just an 8.2 point per game average, not scoring very well against the Phoenix Suns. When he is the away team in this case, in his last 6 away games, he has only covered this 19.5 point prop just once. That's just a 17% cover rate, averaging just 12.8 points per game during that time span. Now, when he's coming off of a loss, as the Denver Nuggets are, out of his last 10 losses, he's covered this point prop 8 times out of 10. So that's an 80% cover rate, averaging 25.7 points per game. So that's a knock against taking the under on Michael Porter Jr. He seems to bounce back after a loss and come up with a big performance. Now, to top things off here, versus top 10 defenses, he's just 1 for his last 5 going against top 10 defenses, averaging 18.2 points per game. That's a 20% cover rate. And last but not least, as an underdog, which they are tonight, the Denver Nuggets are an underdog, he is 1 out of 5 in his last 5 games as an underdog, covering just 20% of the time, averaging 13.6 points per game. So there you have it. Some extra insights, some extra info on Michael Porter Jr., different scenarios there to consider. Now, we're going to wrap things up by looking at RotoWire. Now, they've got him at 19.5 points across 3 different books. We got him as a -120 to go under, a -116 to go under, and a -118 to go under. So in this case, I'm kind of agreeing with the sports books, the projections, the averages seem to agree. We've talked about the scenarios that were provided to us by FanSure. I think everything adds up to Michael Porter Jr. going under, especially dealing with a nagging back issue. If he does suit up, I don't expect him to be 100%. Heck, he might not even play a full complement of minutes. So the under on Michael Porter Jr. is the way that I'm looking to go. Now we're going to take a look at the other side of this game, which is Deandre Ayton. Deandre Ayton is currently at 16.5 points. Now this one's a little bit tricky. 16.5 points. I mean, this could go either way, right? So let's take a look at Deandre Ayton real quick and get an idea of which way we should be looking on him. So we'll find him over here on Number Fire. You can see he's at 15.2 points, which indicates that an under on 16.5 might be the way to go here. So let's go over to NBA.com. We'll take a look at how well Ayton's been doing, both in the regular season and in this playoff series so far. He's at 14.4 points per game for the season, which obviously that puts him under 16.5 points. Let's click his stats here and we'll look at his playoff games. He's got 7 games in this playoff run so far, 36.3 minutes per game. Now he's been averaging 16.4 points per game, which puts him slightly under this prop of 16.5 points. So far we've got projections that indicate we should be going under on 16.5, and we've got playoff averages that indicate we should be going under on 16.5. So let's remove the playoff filter. Let's click advanced filters. We'll change his opponent to just the Denver Nuggets. We'll see how well he's done against the Nuggets throughout the regular season in this points prop. So he faced Denver 3 times this season, 37.4 minutes per game. Now in those matchups, 22 points per game. So a fantastic scoring output for DeAndre Ayton in the regular season versus this Denver Nuggets squad. So the over actually looking pretty good here when you look at those regular season averages versus Denver. Now let's head back over to Basketball Reference. We'll type in DeAndre Ayton's name, pull up his player card here, and we'll go to the 2021 season. Obviously, scroll all the way down to the bottom. You guys can all do this for free on your own. All of these sites are completely free. And we'll look at his playoff games here and see how many times he's covered 16.5 points. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 games out of 7 in which he's covered 16.5 points. Came close in this one with 14, but didn't get it done. 8 and 8 against the Lakers, those last 2 games in that Lakers series. So overall, he's been covering 16.5 points more often than not. So let's head back over to FanSure. I'll see what we've got here on DeAndre Ayton. It looks like the information I have here was when he was at 15.5 points. So I guess that PrizePicks bumped him up to 16.5. I'll still give you this info anyway. At 15.5 points against the Denver Nuggets, he's covered 15.5 points, not 16.5. Careful here. You got to pay attention. 15.5 points. He has covered 6 out of 6 times. That's a 100% cover rate, averaging 22.7 points per game in his last 6 games against the Denver Nuggets. So that's pretty impressive. Now, in his last 4 games, he has failed to cover 15.5 points, not 16.5, 15.5 points. He has failed to cover that in 3 out of the last 4 games. That's just a 25% cover rate. He's averaging 12.5 points per game in his last 4 games. So that's kind of concerning. Now, as a home game, or when he plays as the home team, he has covered 15.5 points 4 out of 5 times, which is good for 19.4 points per game. Well, that's a pretty good average when he plays at home. So he plays pretty good at home versus the road. And then last but not least, when he is a favorite, and the Phoenix Suns are a favorite, in his last 15 games in which the Suns are favorites, he has covered this point prop of 15.5 points just 3 times out of his last 15, an average of 11.3 points per game. So there you go. There's a few different scenarios to consider when talking about this DeAndre Ayton prop. I'll be honest with you, when I started the video, he was at 15.5. Things are always moving, changing over on PrizePicks, so he's already at 16.5 points. Now let's wrap things up by looking at RotoWire. We'll go over to the points prop for DeAndre Ayton. You can see that across the industry, he's at 15.5 points. PrizePicks, they've just decided to do things a little differently and bump him up. They're always reacting to action as it comes in. So we've got DeAndre Ayton at 15.5 here. He's a -120 to go over, -116 to go over, and a -115 over and under. He's dead even on this last sports book. So there you have it, guys. Two out of the 3 books like him to go over 15.5 points. He has since been bumped to 16.5 points, probably receiving a lot of action on the over at 15.5. So PrizePicks bumped him up to 16.5. I don't blame you if you want to fade this now that it's been bumped up. Totally up to you, though. All right, so with that one out of the way, let's talk one more point prop that's looking pretty good here, and that is Michael Bridges. Now, Michael Bridges at 13.5 points, I don't love so much in terms of taking the over. This is a situation where I think we should probably look to go under here. I believe he's at 12.5 points in the first game of this series. He might even have been at 11.5 points. I can't recall. But anyway, 13.5 just seems a little bit too high for this kid. So let's move it back over to Number Fire. We'll take a look at Michael Bridges and this prop. So I got his name typed in here. You can see he is projected for 13.5 points, putting him right on the money versus PrizePicks and the rest of the industry today. So let's go ahead and move it over to NBA.com since those projections didn't really help us out any. And we'll type in Michael Bridges' name. We'll open up a new tab here. You can do that by doing Control-Click in case you were wondering. And you can see for the season, he averages 13.5 points. So his projections today are 13.5 over on PrizePicks and Number Fire. And his season averages are 13.5. So we haven't really received any information to push us one way or the other over or under here. Let's go look at his playoff averages so far. 7 games this season in the playoffs, 33.5 minutes per game. Now his scoring average is actually down 11.3 points per game. So he's down by over 2 points per game versus his season averages so far. So that's a little bit of a good sign if we are looking to take the under here on Michael Bridges. So let's go ahead, click traditional splits. We will take off the playoff filter, click advanced filters, change it from all teams to just the Denver Nuggets, click run it, and you'll get a report back from NBA.com. Now, he's faced the Nuggets 3 times this season, 37.7 minutes per game, and he's been averaging 16.3 points per game in the regular season versus the Denver Nuggets. So this would indicate that an overplay is something to consider. So, regular season, playoffs, 2 different animals. In my opinion, playoffs are like almost a season in itself. So we'll move on from there, knowing what we know now. And we'll take a look at Michael Bridges' game log real quick and give you an idea how well he's been scoring, or maybe how well he hasn't been scoring throughout this playoff run so far. Click the game logs, go to 2021 season, go all the way down. You know the drill. We scroll over to the side here, you can see his game log. Now at 13.5 points, he has covered this just 1 time, and it was in his last game against Denver where he dropped 23 points on them. Now, I expect this number to come down. I don't expect him to score 23 points in 2 games in a row, not even 20 points. I'd be surprised if he hit 20 points. You can see how the rest of the games went against the Lakers. Just 10 points, 6 points, 6 points, 11 points, 13 points, and 10 points. So he's only covered 13.5 points 1 time out of his last 7 playoff appearances. Not a very good cover rate, which also indicates that we should probably be looking to take the under here, especially if we don't think he can reach 23 or more points again. Now, we're going to give you a few insights here, a few different scenarios for Michael Bridges. You can see that in his last number of games, which are 8 games against this opponent here, the Denver Nuggets, he's only covered 1 out of his last 8, averaging just 10.8 points per game. So that's looking good for an under. Now, versus top 10 defenses like this Denver Nuggets team, in his last 7 games against a top 10 defense, he has covered 13.5 points just 1 time. That's good for just a 14% cover percentage, 11.3 points per game. So again, the under looking like the way to go. Now, against opponents with a win percentage over 500, in his last 7 games, he's covered just 1 time. Again, averaging just 11.3 points per game. And last but not least, coming off of a win like the Phoenix Suns are coming off of a win in his last 6 games, he has covered just 1 out of his last 6, good for just an 11.5 point per game average. That's a 17% cover rate. So you could see in the 4 scenarios that I provided, he has not covered this 13.5 point prop with much success. So I am still looking to take the under on Michael Bridges in this situation. Now we'll wrap things up by going back over to RotoWire. We'll look at the various sports books. We'll find Michael Bridges here. He's at 13.5 points against across 3 different books here. Now this first one's got him as a -134 to go under, a -122 to go under, so 2 great starts there. And last but not least, at 12.5 points, they got him as a -128 to go over. So between 12.5 and 13.5 lies 13 points for those who are playing along at home. You got it. So if he scores 13 or less points, we take the under, we win money. So I'm going to stick with it, taking the under on Michael Bridges and these 13.5 points. Now to wrap things up, I've got a couple of 3-point props that I want to discuss. The first one is back on the Denver Nuggets side of things, which is Austin Rivers, who's at 1.5 3-pointers. I've got him projected to go for about 1.78 3-point makes, which is pretty close to 2. A lot closer to 2 than it is 1. So the edge or the lean here would be on the over on Austin Rivers. So we're going to go back to NBA.com. We're going to take a look at Austin Rivers and his player card here, get an idea how well he's been shooting it from beyond the arc for this Denver Nuggets team. So to do that, we got to click stats. We got to go to season type. We're going to change it to regular season from playoffs. And you can see that in 36 games with the Denver Nuggets, 15 games with the Denver Nuggets this season, he's attempted 4.8 3-pointers per game, making 1.8. So pretty close to 2 makes. This is definitely a lean toward the over on this particular player prop. So we'll click the playoffs now. We'll change it to the playoff scenario. He's appeared in 7 games. Now he's attempting 5 3-pointers per game in this playoff run, making 2.3 of them, which is good for a 45% 3-point field goal percentage. So fantastic. His numbers are actually trending up in the playoffs in terms of 3-point attempts and 3-point makes. Gotta love that. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and click traditional splits. We'll change this from playoffs to regular season. Click advanced filters, change it from the all opponents to just the Phoenix Suns here, and see how well he shot against the Suns in his previous matchups. And he doesn't have any previous matchups against the Phoenix Suns apparently. So we'll move on to basketball reference. We'll type in Austin Rivers' name. And we'll take a look at his game logs throughout the playoffs so far and see how well he's been shooting it on a game-to-game basis here. So we scroll all the way down to the bottom. We go over to the 3P column, which is 3-point field goals. That's his makes. And you can see that he's covered once, twice, 3 times, 4 times out of 7 games. So more often than not, he is covering this 1.5 3-point prop. So we'll head over to FanShore here, and I will pull up some scenarios for Austin Rivers. I've got 2 different ones to talk about. It says that when the Denver Nuggets are coming off of a loss, in his last 7 games in which they come off a loss, he has actually covered 6 out of 7 of those games. And that's good for an 86% cover percentage. And he's averaging 2.7 3-point makes coming off of losses. So that's fantastic to see. And then the other one that's probably a little bit more important here is that in his last 14 games, he has covered 1.5 3-point makes in 10 out of 14. That is a very high success rate, good for 71% cover percentage, averaging 2.6 3-point makes in his last 14 games. So Austin Rivers has been shooting it very well from downtown over his last 14 games. So to wrap this up, we're going to go to the 3-point category here, find Austin Rivers, and he's at 1.5 3-point makes on 2 different sites. We got him as a minus 127 to go over. Those are pretty good odds, but even better, stronger odds, minus 142 to go over 1.5 3-point makes. So I love it. I'm sticking with it. The projections look good. The Vegas lines look good. His averages recently look great. So I'm going to go with the over here for Austin Rivers and this 1.5 3-point make prop. Now to cap the video off, I'm going to do one more 3-point prop, and we're talking about my man, Jay Crowder, who's at 2.5 3-point makes. At 2.5 3-point makes, I've got him projected to go closer to 3 3-point makes, which means we should be looking to take the over on this prop. So let's go back to NBA.com. We'll type in Jay Crowder's name here, get an idea at how well he's been shooting from beyond the arc here. So we'll open up a new tab, click the stats category. We'll change this from playoffs to regular season. Let's take a look at his regular season numbers first. And you can see that he attempts 6.3 3-pointers per game, making 2.5, which puts him exactly at the same prop for 3-pointers as he is on PrizePicks at 2.5. So season averages, today's projection over on PrizePicks, both at 2.5. That's good for a 38.9% 3-point field goal percentage. So let's change this from regular season to playoffs and see what happens. In 7 playoff games, he's attempting a lot more 3-pointers, 7.9 3-point attempts per game. Let's just round it up, call it 8 3-pointers per game. He's making about 2.4, which puts him slightly under versus where his 3-point makes for the season were at 2.5. That's good for a 30.9% 3-point field goal percentage. So a little bit of a knock. He's attempting more, making less, but his averages haven't really changed a whole lot. So we're going to head back over to Basketball Reference. Let's type in Jay Crowder's name and look at his game logs and see how well he's done on a game-to-game basis throughout the playoffs so far. So we go to game logs, go to 2021, all the way down to the bottom, and then we'll go to the 3P category, 3-point field goals. So you can see that he attempts quite a few, guys. He's getting the volume 7, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9, 9. So his attempts are definitely up. Now, we got to look at the makes because that's the important part here. Is he making them? He can attempt 100 of them, but if he's only making 1 out of 100, that's not going to do us any good. So he has covered 2.5 3-point makes 1, 2, 3, 4 times. And actually, he's got 4 covers in a row. So his 3-point field goals in terms of the makes are actually pretty good here in his last 4 games. He's making a lot more over his last 4. So that's good for 4 out of 7 playoff games so far. Now I'm going to go back over to FanShore here, tell you a little bit more about this 3-point prop. As I mentioned, he is 4 for 4, going over 2.5 3-point makes in his last few games, averaging 3.8 3-point makes. That's almost 4 3-point makes per game over his last 4 games. Now, versus top 10 defenses in his last 4 meetings against a top 10 defense, he is also 4 for 4, averaging 3.8 3-point makes. And finally, when the opponent has a win percentage over 500, he is also 4 for 4, 3.8 3-point makes. So he's just been on fire lately, covering this 2.5 3-point prop. So I'm still liking the over here on Jay Crowder. I think it makes a lot of sense. Now, last but not least, we're going to wrap things up by looking at RotoWire and the various sports books. We got him at 2.5 3-point makes on 2 different sites. Look at these odds. -159 to go over, looking very, very juicy, and a -158 to go over. So I'm not going to overthink this one. I think that there's enough evidence here, enough of a sample size to take Jay Crowder over 2.5 3-point makes. Let's hope that he keeps the hot streak going for the Phoenix Suns. That's going to do it for today's video. Which prop stands out to you? Which ones are you liking? Which ones are you hating? Which ones did I not talk about that maybe you're really, really high on? Leave it down in the comments section below. You might help me out. You might help out someone else who watches these videos. We appreciate your fan interaction here. Let's run those likes up, guys. We've been hitting like 40 or more likes for a few videos now, and I want to keep that hot streak going. Continue to hit that thumbs up button if this video helped you out today, and definitely make sure you're subscribed and notifications turned on. Good luck tonight, no matter where you're playing. Hopefully it's on PrizePicks. We'll catch you in the next video, guys. Peace out.